Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. What is the Business and Professional Women's Group, commonly called BPW? What is BPW doing to provide economic opportunities for women as well as men in many areas of the world? We'll be back in just a moment to talk about these and other important issues. Welcome back to our program. Today we're going to focus attention on a group that's working internationally to help women as well as men to develop a lot of economic activities. My guest today is going to bring us up to date on the Business and Professional Women's Group. My guest is Ms. Freda Miriklis, and Freda is the International President of the Business and Professional Women's International. From 2008 to 2011, she was elected Vice President of the United Nations Chair on the UN Committee on the Status of Women. Ms. Miriklis received many awards in the past, and one that's very prestigious is the Young Australian Business and Professional Women's Award, 1998 to 2000. Ms. Miriklis is an investment advisor by profession, having worked in the wealth management and investment advisory industry for 20 years. Freda Miriklis, welcome to Global Connections Television.
Hi, Bill. Thank you. It's great to be here.
I appreciate you being with me. Let's jump right into it.
Sure.
Business and Professional Women's Group, BPW. I'm sure many of our viewers have heard of it, probably are members too. What exactly is it? When were you formed? Why were you formed?
Sure. Well, the International Federation of Business and Professional Women, known worldwide as BPW International, was first founded in 1930, and it was the vision of our founder that she realised that at the time there were a lot of charitable organisations, a lot of women doing a lot of really good work, raising money and sorting common interest for men and women alike. But she felt that the representation for women in the workplace and women for business and professionals, their voice wasn't being heard. So she wanted to form this collective, this international federation as it became. And the birthplace was chosen to be Geneva, Switzerland for deliberate reason, because at the time was, of course, the establishment of the the League of Nations, and her idea was that this really needed government representation, it needed government buy-in as well as the voice of civil society.
Mm-hmm. Now, how many countries are you operating in? How many chapters do you have? And how many members do you have? I'm sure you're a membership organization.
We're a membership organisation, and today BPW International's footprint is across some 98 countries and growing. And we are across 5 continents, and our membership is fairly extensive. Anything from C-suite management to women that are in emerging markets, emerging leaders, and entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm. That is so very important. Sounds like you've got half of the United Nations there in 100 different areas, or 90 or so.
A fairly good representation.
A fairly good representation, right? Well, now in 2000, the countries of the world, the majority of them came together at the United Nations. They developed or adopted the Millennium Development Goals, and the idea was to look at 8 areas they could focus on over a 15-year period from 2000 to 2015. And of course, the majority of all the countries have signed on to the many non-governmental organizations, private sector groups, faith-based groups, your group, BPW, I'm sure. And the goals were, a few of them, were to reduce abject poverty by 50%, to provide education for primary school students, universal primary school education, to reverse the AIDS pandemic, and of course, goal number 3 was to empower women, which ties right into your area. And this empowering women is so critical. We see that there are ways to empower women. You can empower them politically, culturally, socially, but economically. And of course, to give women a hand up or some assistance in starting their own bank accounts or starting their own businesses, be it they may be bakers or they may be tending goats or sheep or whatever the case might be. Do you bring the goals in, especially goal number 3, to empower women?
Look, we sure do. And in fact, BPW International believes that most of those 8 Millennium Development Goals really do need the voice of women to be represented. And without the voice of women, we really can't, we won't be in a position where we will be able to deliver on those MDGs. And of course, our immediate focus now is really on what happens in terms of the framework after the 2015. So we have a fairly large contingent that we are organising for the Rio Plus 20 conference, which is forthcoming on sustainable development, a very important meeting where a lot of issues, again, related to the MDGs are going to be discussed, climate change and the like. And these are all very, very important. I guess the clear message here, though, is that women's voices really need to be represented, and that women need to have a seat at the table. And whether that be at the UN level, at the government level, at the private sector level, or even at the community level. When we have more engagement of women, we know that we get better quality collaboration, more inclusive policies, more inclusive decisions are made, and that's absolutely vital, not only for communities, but also to empower nations and to empower the world as well, ultimately.
Absolutely critical, because women are the epicenter of the family, and in many cases of the community, of the region,
That's right.
of the whole country, if you put them all together collectively.
Yeah.
So
And
they're the majority too.
Absolutely. And Bill, one of the major things here is that, today women in our own right, we are earning $10 trillion. That number's likely to go to $18 trillion. So in terms of earnings capacity, we really are quite a large market in ourselves. I think we often talk about, big emerging economies of India and China. We'll put those two together. We've got a bigger market just with, looking at women alone. And the other thing is, as consumers as well, we know that now we are consuming, or we are purchasers of in excess of $20 trillion of goods and services around the world. So I think that argument really needs to be understood in terms of the vital importance that we bring to this, and economic empowerment is part of that.
Now, if our viewers would like more information on business and professional women, they can go to bpw-international.org and find a lot more information about what we're talking about today.
They sure can. We'd love them to come and visit us.
And can they join?
They sure can.
They can join.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. And we would love to put them in touch with our affiliates. As we mentioned, we're in over 98 countries, so there are a plethora of clubs that are available, and whether they're federations or associate clubs that are ready to do business with women.
Mm-hmm. Now, I mentioned we've been talking about the Millennium Development Goals, the 8 goals, and goal number 8 is to promote economic cooperative efforts or partnerships, a collaboration of various groups coming together, because we've come to the conclusion no one group can do it all. You've got to work together, pool your resources, pool your strengths, and that way you're stronger as a unit. And that sounds like what you're doing. Now, one of the key groups that a large number of groups people around the world are networking with is the United Nations. Which of the UN agencies are you networking with more closely? I know the UN Global Compact is one of them. What is the Global Compact, and what are you doing with that group?
The Global Compact is one of our strategic collaborators, so we really value that relationship quite closely. And the Global Compact, I guess, came out of a Davos convention. It was birthed by Kofi Annan, and basically brought about CEOs that had a consciousness of wanting to deliver some degree of corporate social responsibility. And it was around 10 key principles in the areas of labour, anti-corruption, human rights, and of course labour, anti-corruption, human rights, and environment. And of course, these collaborators, or these stakeholders are very important to BPW International, because in 2009, at the calling of Secretary General Ban Ki-moon himself, we actually saw quite a few changes happening at the United Nations, and post 2008, we also saw the United Nations, or the UN Women, back then known as UNIFEM, come together with the Global Compact to, in fact, create a joint initiative which is today known as the Women's Empowerment Principles. Equality means business. And BPW was engaged from the onset in terms of arranging a lot of the consultations initially, so that we could provide some input into that dialogue and that process. And then subsequently, we're now actually developed our own toolkits where our members have now taken this to the actual boardrooms of their countries. So we actually engage now with C-suite executives to CEOs, and we encourage them to sign the statement of support. And the Women's Empowerment Principles really are designed to look at how we can change the behaviours and the cultures that are currently within our workplaces, within our marketplaces and within our communities. And that's vitally important to BPW International today.
Now, do you see those cultures changing? Do you see that that the boardrooms are more receptive to having women involved? And of course, we've seen in the developed countries where there's been a glass ceiling where women could get so high in an organization and no higher. And in developing countries, there are other forms of discrimination against women.
Yes.
But do you see that breaking down?
Look, I think it's a learning process, whether it's developed or least developed countries that we're considering. And look, I think the best thing here is to learn from best practices. So the United Nations host each year a meeting that is convened by Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. Michelle Bachelet also comes along to the meeting, and we gather together the stakeholders and those companies, those CEOs, the progressive companies that have actually signed on to the Women's Empowerment Principles, and we learn about what's actually working in the marketplace or the workplaces and what isn't as well. It's important that we actually understand what isn't working so that we can get a better handle on how we can actually combat or how we can enhance working environments. And so that's absolutely been instrumental. And BPW again has been involved in that dialogue and in that process. And we know that we are the gender experts. So we have good dialogue that we can have with the private sector, and that's really something that we're trying to focus on, particularly in this triennium, bringing that voice of women to business, as it were.
That's very, very important. And you were talking about this whole situation with the Global Compact, with the UN agency, but you also mentioned Michelle Bachelet, who is the former president of Chile and the head of UN Women, which is a relatively new organ within the not an organ, but an office within the UN system, an agency within the UN system. How do you interact with UN Women?
Well, our interaction mainly, I have to say, has come through the Women's Empowerment Principles. Because BPW today has taken the lead, we are now considered as the lead NGO. And I guess with the United Nations, they develop a lot of very good policies, a lot of very good programs. The principles are no different to that. However, combined with an NGO, the voice of civil society, we can actually take those women's empowerment principles and we can impregnate them, or we can take them right across the world. So that partnership, that collaboration is really quite valuable, and it's instrumental in really being able to get that voice of the United Nations out to our workplaces.
You're watching Global Connections Television, which is an independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. We'll be back in just a moment after this important message.
My name is Michael Douglas. As a United Nations messenger of peace, I look forward to the day when all of us who inhabit this fragile planet are free from the threat of nuclear weapons. That's why I'm calling on all young artists to use their creative talents to imagine what that world would be like, a world free of nuclear weapons. The United Nations and the Harmony for Peace Foundation have jointly launched the 2012 Art for Peace contest. This contest is open to children and teens across the globe. Wherever you live, we want to hear from you. Whether you paint or draw, use watercolors or acrylics, pencils or crayons, the Art for Peace contest wants you to use your imagination to express your vision for a world free of nuclear weapons. Art is the universal language. Art speaks to our hearts and minds. Art can make a difference. And so can you. Thank you.
Welcome back to our program. Today we're looking at an organization, the Business and Professional Women's Group, that's working with women as well as men around the world to promote economic opportunities and many other types of opportunities. My guest today is someone who's very knowledgeable of this organization. Ms. Freda Miriklis is the International President of Business and Professional Women International, commonly called BPW. She, from 2008 to 2011, was elected Vice President of the United Nations Chair on the UN Committee on the Status of Women. Ms. Miriklis is an investment advisor by profession, having worked in the wealth management and investment advisory industry for 20 years. Freda, we're talking about business and professional women, and we've been talking about some of your partnerships with the United Nations Women Group, with the Global Compact. You also have a partnership with Unesco, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. What are you doing with Unesco?
In fact, Bill, this is something that we're very excited about, and we're just about to launch this in April. So this is bringing together now the southeastern part of Europe. So obviously we're talking about the Mediterranean countries, mainly focusing on Turkey, Greece, Cyprus, and a few of the other countries that take on the Balkan region predominantly. And what we've done is we've entered into discussions with the Unesco Women and Peace Centre, and we are particularly interested in putting aside the politics. BPW International in its own right is an apolitical organisation, and we believe that the time has come where there are a lot of women's empowerment issues, women's issues in general, that really need to be discussed, and we need to be able to put politics aside and really be able to bring those issues and have a common platform where we can have this sort of discussion. So we're going to be launching a leadership training centre, and we're very excited about that opportunity with UNESCO.
And again, people can find out more about this on your website.
On our website. In fact, Bill, just in the last couple of days, we've been here in New York as part of the 56th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, but just prior to that, we take the opportunity to bring our leaders from across the world. And so we've just convened our leadership summit here at the Princeton Club, and in that we've been able to have dialogue with our leaders about the key policy-led initiatives, and one of these, of course, in terms of how we're supporting our policies, is with the initiative with UNESCO. So that detail will make its way onto the website, and people can find out more there.
And that's at bpw-international.org. And I'm sure it'll probably wind up on the UNESCO.org website, perhaps tomorrow or the next day.
Absolutely. Once we officially launch that opportunity, yeah.
Exactly. Now, there are other partnerships that you have. One is with the Commonwealth Business Group. Is that the Commonwealth Business Women? What exactly is that?
Look, and
if I got the title right.
Yeah, no, you're spot on,
Okay.
and that's really interesting. Let me just tell you very quickly, though. We have 3 policy-led initiatives. The first we've spoken about, the Women's Empowerment Principles, Equality Means Business. This is the joint initiative between UN Women and UN Global Compact, and we are a lead collaborator and taking that out to the world. The second is the Equal Pay Day campaigns, and here this is an idea that's been around for quite some time, but our affiliates in Germany have won the tremendous support of their country, who has now given them 1 million euros over the next 3 years to really create the advocacy and awareness campaign around equal pay, speaking to the very heart of the International Labour Organisation's campaign of equal work for work of equal value. So we're very excited about that. And now that initiative, since 2009, we launched that globally. We now have over 50 countries that have participated right throughout Europe, but also taking that into Asia Pacific and now introducing that into Africa, which we're very excited about. The third initiative is around the entrepreneurial women, which really speaks to the grassroots women and the very heart and soul of BPW International. And this is where we start looking at different collaborations, and we've entered into a very unique collaboration with the International Trade Centre, which is a subsidiary of the World Trade Organisation. We've created a platform here where BPW International is providing women vendors or sellers, and we've also been able to bring together other partners who represent the multinational corporations. And this group of multinationals have decided that collectively, as they represent $700 billion of supply chain management, the way they want to support the United Nations achieve the Millennium Development Goals is through MDG 3, which speaks to economic empowerment, and they've decided that they will allocate a portion of their supply chain to women-owned, run, operated businesses. So together, all stakeholders have formed what we refer to as the Global Platform for Action on Sourcing from Women Vendors. And we had the inaugural platform just last year in Chongqing, China, where in fact, now that we're talking about the rural theme as part of the 56th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, one of the first contracts that we signed was with women in the Chongqing province, where the women in the agriculture sector supplying fresh fruit and vegetables are now supplying Walmart with a $14 million contract, which he thought was absolutely fantastic. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. This really has the potential for women to power trade their economies out of some of the depressed states that we currently find them. So let me get to your question about the Commonwealth Business...
Okay, please do. No, please go right ahead.
Are you sure? Okay.
Yes, go right ahead.
In leading on to that...
Okay.
Last year we had the Commonwealth Heads of Government, which was staged in Western Australia, in my country of Australia. And part of that, given that Prime Minister Julia Gillard is now the chair of the Commonwealth, there was a communique that was officially launched by the Commonwealth Business Forum. And it was their decision to ensure that we could really concentrate on the economic empowerment of women. For the first time, and the reason for that was that for the first time, we actually had the first Prime Minister, female Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, hand over the chairmanship role to the first female Prime Minister of Australia before Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. Now, never before in the history of the Commonwealth have we had that combination of three heads of state coming together. And the Business Council decided that now was the time for women's economic empowerment to actually be acknowledged. So it was communicated to our Prime Minister on the very first day of the Commonwealth Business Forum, and also through the Commonwealth Heads of Government, they now have women's economic empowerment firmly embedded on their agenda. So we are now collectively working together. We've formed the Commonwealth Business Council, the Commonwealth Business Women's Council, and it is a tripartite agreement bringing together Australia, Pakistan, and the United Kingdom. And with that, what we're hoping to do is to really bring forward the procurement opportunities for women entrepreneurs. It's not another talk fest. This is about real action and bringing real contracts back to women throughout the Commonwealth. And as we know, Bill, the Commonwealth is representative of 54 countries, one of the largest cluster groups outside of the United Nations, representing a third of the world's population, and of course in excess of 20% of the global trade that happens in the world. So we're very excited about that initiative also.
There's a lot to be excited about. Let's go back for a moment and talk about the Equal Pay Awareness Campaign. That is an extremely important point. And as I mentioned earlier, and you've mentioned too, that women are the epicenter of the family. They are so vital in every society. And as I think back, the situation, these statistics are a few years old, but women headed up one, especially in the developing countries now, primarily headed up one of every three families. The women they did 75% of the work in a society. They earn 1/10 of what men earn, and they own 1/100th of the property. Now, those figures have probably changed, but women, they contribute a lot. They work at times in the home. They have their own businesses. They may be street vendors as far as selling candy or whatever the case might be. They are working on farms. Much of that may be free labor, but this is so very important to focus attention on this because so often we don't realize how there's an exploitation taking place of women, and not just in developing countries, but in developed countries also. We have situations where we have sweatshops in the United States and probably in some of the European countries and what have you. Not that the officials want them, but they're there and they're trying to get rid of them. But that is so important. You're focusing on this. And how do you raise that visibility? How are you working to drive this point home even more so that women are so critical and they should be paid for what they do and paid a fair amount?
Yeah, and look, I agree with everything that you've just said, and I think for us the importance here is with our affiliates. Obviously, our affiliates need to really understand the concept of equal work for equal pay, and a lot of them actually say to us, "Equal work for equal pay. Well, we're getting paid the same amount of money. We had a law or an act that was passed, and of course, women are getting paid the same amount as men. What we do is we try to encourage them to actually engage with their bureaus, with their statistical bureaus of their governments. And it's interesting because even in Korea, where we didn't think that we were going to have much traction, once they actually did that level of research and they found the disparity in excess of 20% in terms of what the male was earning compared to the female, that really motivated the women to say, well, this is not fair. We really need to do something about it. And I think we really need to be able to engage with lots of stakeholders. This is a problem that is much broader than just for women. And we have to find solutions dealing with men and women, but also wider than that, going out to other stakeholders. So now we're forming alliances in terms of how we raise the awareness around these campaigns. So it's not only government, although government is very important to us, it's also trade unions. It's forming alliances with key private sector members, so big major corporations that understand the importance of this and that more so are doing something about it, that say, no, we're drawing a line in the sand here. Women will be able to earn the same amount as men in our companies. But I think whilst we've made a fair bit of progress just through the BPW campaigns themselves, and we have many stories that we can share with you, it's important to realise that women have to actually stand up and they have to learn to negotiate. They have to learn to be able to go to their employers and to be able to really be able to say, well, you know what? In this review, I think I'm worth a little bit more, and to be able to have that dialogue and to have it comfortably. I think that's really important.
And the society must make sure that they're able to do that and can do it openly and freely and be able to exchange ideas, which is absolutely critical.
Sure, and stereotypes are important, and of course the sense of values, and we learn those at home, and we know that all of those basic awareness aspects and stereotypes begin at the grassroots civil society, and that's where our work always starts.
Now, we're just about out of time. Before we do run out, very briefly, as you look over the horizon, what do you see as some of the major challenges in the future over the next 2 years of your presidency in helping to empower women?
So my term is a 3-year term.
Oh, 3 years,
and,
okay.
And I finished in 2014 when we go to Jeju, Korea. We're very excited about that. We have a big triennial conference. For BPW International, I think, Bill, what you can expect to see is some important and critical partnerships that we are looking at forming with the private sector. Our triennium theme is about empowered women leading business. Our theme speaks to women that are ready to stand up and take the power, not wait for the power to be handed to them. And we believe that today we have enough of the evidence now to show what has been vitally missing from our advocacy for the past 80 years has been that business case. And today we're charged with that business case, and that is the enabling factor that's making a big difference to the work that BPW is doing. So we invite any of the corporate sectors to join us in our plight. Thanks, Bill.
Well, Freda Miriklis, President of Business and Professional Women's Group, International Federation of Business and Professional Women, I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
It's been a great pleasure. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you. I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us on today's Global Connections program.